Hello, everyone. This is Arthur Roget with Ultria. I think we're at the top of the hour in about a minute based on Mickey's big hand and small hand on my watch. But a little bit of housekeeping for those of you who are new to our sessions. We're going to run this for about 45 minutes. Highly interactive in terms of we'll keep the presentation PowerPoint to a minimum. I'll have a couple of slides, we'll talk a little bit. Braden Robinson, our Senior Solutions Engineer, will jump in and run some demonstrations. Unusual for this format, though, since we have two things that are somewhat unrelated, e-signature and repository searching. We may break the Q&A into separate sessions. I don't mean one for questions and one for answers. I mean questions and answers for repository and searching and e-signature. I'm sorry, I should have found myself so funny at 11 o'clock on a Friday morning. We are going to give everyone another minute or two to join our call. People are certainly bandwidth challenged with a couple of folks sharing bandwidth at home for most of us. So give us another few minutes. I'm not always used to being on video during these things, so I was about to get up and get a cup of coffee, but I'm just fine where I am. I've got about a minute after the hour, so I see folks are still coming into the platform. A little bit of additional housekeeping. There is a Q&A tab. Please enter questions throughout. I'll try to group questions and answers around our two main topics today, repository searching and e-signature. This will be a live demo platform. I will do a little bit of PowerPoint, but really it'll be about seeing the platform in use. And let me take a look at the participant count, see how we're doing. Okay, I've got one or two folks who have got their hands raised. That means it's either video or audio challenges. I'll ask our marketing team to please reach out. I'm not going to use names, but you know who you are. No. So we're going to give another minute for the exclamation points to clear. So Ankit or Aditi, if you could reach out to one of the first guys on the list there, so that he may be having a challenge with audio. For those of you who are not having a problem with audio, I apologize. We're going to wait just another minute or two. I've got a couple of folks who look like they are trying to get some system assistance. A little bit of alliteration there, and they should clear in just a minute or two. We now have several more people who have also jumped in there. I think we should be good to go. Perfect. First and foremost, I hope everyone is well, and thank you very much for joining our Frankly Friday series. This is sort of our last of our official Frankly Fridays. I may be asking our team to send out a poll or a survey to get some additional ideas. I think our next series will be focused on business case justification and hard dollar savings that is realizable through CLM. And we're going to do that in the same kind of format that we've been running, which will be sort of bursty, either weekly or maybe every other week for this next series, and with real life, real world examples. So to that end, I'm joined today by Braden Robinson, a senior consultant for Ultria, and Braden will be driving the platform for our sort of a deeper dive into gaining value or increasing the value of your contract assets through repository search and reporting, as well as implementation of e-signature integrated into the Ultria CLM. Some of our earlier topics have been focused on artificial intelligence and our Orbit offering, and we'll probably touch on that a little bit at the end if time allows. So from a housekeeping perspective, everyone right now is on mute. You are able to hear me, or at least so says our platform team. So let us begin. Please do throw questions up throughout the session, and we may have two separate Q&A windows. Introductions and contest rules, sort of an unusual way to start an agenda. For those of you who joined us before, we've been running a contest for the best question asked during each session, and then announcing typically on the trailing week. I am somewhat remiss in that I have not gone through last week's questions and picked a winner. So that's going to happen probably in concert with today's questions, and we'll send out an email letting everybody know. For the person who asks the best question, we'll give a limited use Orbit license, which is our AI contract analysis engine. That'll run up to 500 contracts with built-in our sort of Orbit Protector module for risk factor analysis. Don't take the COVID-19 thing as fear-mongering. Just we've had a bunch of customers using Orbit today to look for things like force majeure, termination for insolvency, termination for cause, seeing what contracts they can put on pause versus those contracts that have fixed term. But all of these sort of risk factor analyses are built into this license for up to 500 contracts. For the qualified charity of the winner's choosing, Ultria will grant $500 to that charity. And we absolutely are thrilled to help out wherever our prospects are. We certainly support charitable work for all of our employees everywhere that they happen to be across the globe, but it's nice to be able to reach out and touch other folks. So the Ultria overview will probably take less than 10 minutes, give us more time for the demonstration itself, but really just sort of focus on what we provide and who we are. Ultria develops and licenses AI-powered contract lifecycle management and AI-powered contract analysis solutions. We look at artificial intelligence in a very practical and applied way. Our AI engine is specific to contract language. It understands the contract process. And whether it is loosely coupled with a robotic process automation for enabling the intake of contracts, which is a great way to reduce your total cycle time, as well as improve the accuracy of the best first draft generated. Using automation on intake is absolutely, I'll say, a low-risk, high-reward way to approach things. The second really is leveraging the artificial intelligence for disassembling third-party content. And everyone says, oh, I only have 20% third-party, or I only have 50%. The reality is, in today's world, half of all contracts signed, at least, are third-party for somebody, right? So the ability to take a third-party agreement, scan it, reverse engineer it, extract metadata elements from it, and even identify risky clauses or clauses that are so far out of whack that they need an additional legal review is part of the AI metadata extraction and analytics process as it relates to authoring and repository. And then as we look at post-awarding compliance, leveraging things like Orbit Protector to do risk analysis on contracts that are already signed based on changing regulatory compliance or just global economic impacts as more clause types become riskier. I'd like to think that we've reached some point where there's a standard model for that. But every time we think something is good and we have a great view of the world's economic and geopolitical dynamicism, somebody does something or something breaks out somewhere and travels across borders and, well, everyone has to scramble. So what Orbit AI provides is, I'll say, citizen scientist ability to change the risk models based on business information, not data science. And this provides almost real-time risk analysis across your contract repository, whether it's implemented within the CLM, the case of our first 3 rainbows, or whether it's standalone in Orbit's individual separable platform, which allows you, by the way, to leverage the AI capability across any document management or content management platform that you might have. So today we're really talking about the CLM, Ultria CLM, and We look at the L in CLM pretty seriously, life cycle. So we cover the full life cycle from request through renewal. The ability to take intake process from a business user, leverage information to do a best first draft, run that best through draft through appropriate review or approval channels, work with the user from a software and technology enablement perspective to facilitate negotiation, even to put up rules and rails to stop people from hurting themselves by accepting things they really shouldn't, and then moving off to electronic signature, which is part and parcel, by the way, of what we're talking about today. And then we look at the measurement, ongoing performance measurement, compliance for obligations, compliance for entitlements. Really, it's about helping to manage the cash, in many ways, flow around those agreements that you negotiated so hard for. So while you may have here sort of 6 easy to follow or easy to identify steps, there's so much value that people miss in step 5. Leveraging your contract assets for additional incremental revenue, for ensuring revenue resiliency, and even creating agility on your supply chain that can help reduce hard cost, hard dollar, hard yen, euro, pound, franc outlay to third parties in order to stay as liquid as possible in somewhat challenging times. For us, this is sort of a mandatory slide that we like to put up just to help people realize that there are ways that you can drive value from a CLM, no matter where you may be on the maturity scale. So if you are just starting out and you've got effectively a manual process, and you may have some contracts stored on shared drives or email folders or someplace on your desktop, which always scares me when I see a prospect open up. I see 700 icons on their desktop, but they're out there. It's not a bad place to start. But there are some great things that you can do with that. You can analyze risk. You can start to manage expiry. You can bring it into a central repository as you move into stage 2. You can leverage the strength of the centralized repository, start looking at the ability to automate some drafting, and really move up the maturity curve. In the marketplace today, based on the folks that we've talked to on a global basis, between 50 and 70% of our prospect base is firmly between stages 2 and 3. And we see a lot of folks moving towards stage 4, and that's what we'll talk about today a little bit, which is reporting and compliance as well. So we use the term repository, and I tend to use that word because we wake up in the morning, we think CLM, but what really is our repository? A repository is a fancy word really for saying someplace where you are storing things, right? A safe, a vault. That's not a bad analogy, but unfortunately we tend to put things in a safe, we put things in a vault, and we only open them up on special occasions. The reality for many companies is just that. Contracts are signed, maybe somebody takes a note or two, and they're stored in a virtual file cabinet. They're stored in a vault. Really, these are assets that can be leveraged, and they should be leveraged. So our repository for Ultria is a secure, centralized, accessible from anywhere in the globe environment where both your contract, the signed image, as well as a text version of that signed contract, and all of its metadata, the data that's associated with that contract, whether it's embedded in the content or sort of an index above the contract itself, and all of its related documents, right? Its addendums, the appendices, maybe a master, maybe a statement of work, maybe the non-disclosure associated with the beginning of the agreement, where all of this information is linked and is commonly available. And the important part about having the metadata stored with the contracts, as well as having a text searchable version of those contracts stored in one place, means that this is information that is asset, has value, and can be very easily found through searching that we've become used to, free text, almost like a Google-like search, or more structured searching using metadata and category and scope information about how things are being stored. And not just getting a list of all of the things that are out there, but also a preview so that if you're looking for keywords, if I'm looking for force majeure, right? Show me just things with force majeure. I'll put it in quotes. I'll try to spell it close to correct. We'll figure out the right spelling because that's what fuzzy search does, and bring up the paragraphs and the clauses that invoke or have reference to force majeure, so that you can look at your contracts and decide which ones from a thumbnail or a preview perspective you really want to open. It's about providing easy to use information in a real-time search mode that enables you to interact with those results. And that's really about putting information at your fingertips to act now. And this information is not just available to the folks who authored or wrote or negotiated or approved these contracts. Yes, of course it is. But it's also available to anybody you give access to. And you give them secure and specific access that allows them to only see those kinds of things that you want them to see. Now, of course, there's a difference between this kind of high-value, fast, real-time searching and running reports. Reports are taking that sort of structured search to the next level, providing formatting, graphics, embedded charts, and doing it on a regular basis. So yes, I can run a quick report. I can also run a report that's sent out to key shareholders that is mixed text and graphics, puts out a PDF, and is sent out at 3 o'clock in the morning on Monday, so it's the top of people's inboxes. So I've talked a lot about the value, I think, and the impact that search and reporting can bring. Let's turn this over to Braden and see what everything looks like. Braden, over to you. Perfect.
Yeah. So one of the things to talk about is that it is very important to be able to draft a contract. We spent a lot of time in the last few weeks talking about that, bringing things together. But once a contract is in the system, it's just as important to be able to find it. There is a lot going on in this world. We need to make sure that that is that our life is easy, that we do a lot of this more, a lot more of this than we do drafting. Like ultimately, you probably spend more time in your life finding contracts than you do drafting them. And you spend more time looking for elements of those contracts than you do other things. So what we have here is a very intuitive interface. We want to take advantage of the tools you already have at hand, the things you already do today, the skills you've mastered spending the last 20 years on the internet, and use that to make it just as easy to find your agreements. So we have a couple of different options I want to walk through. First, we have folders. Folders can make it very easy to find something, but they're also good at maintaining control and compliance. We have type browsing. So sometimes you want to look around and see what contracts are there. We also have saved searches that you can look at. But the most common, most frequent thing people do are a free text search or a contracting party search. Now, a free text search is, in fact, a fuzzy search. So I search warrant here. I know it's something close to warrant. We've all done this in our search days. And I see a lot of results come up. I get 25 results out of 53. I could narrow this down. I get 25 results. I've already got it narrowed down from 53 using actually a filter for archived and non-archived, which I just set as my default preference. I only want to see non-archived agreements, but you can set these filters up however you want as an organization to make it easy for when you search for something to only get those things that are relevant to you. And if I click, I can see these contracts either as a tile view, which is the view I prefer, where here you see a good deal of information about them. You can scroll down. I could see this as a table view, a little less information, but easier to see a lot more. I could see a summary view where it even starts the preview of the contract right inside of the results. I can have some options as how I get these results, best match, expiration date, whatever I think is most relevant. And there's some search preferences. So I can set these, hey, what do I want to see in the table right away? What data do I want to see come to me? What do I want to be my default search results? All of that's configurable. So it's easy for someone who's using this all the time to get exactly what they want. When they type in warrant, They'll get the results that make sense to them in a format that makes sense to them. If they want a little more detail, I click View Contract Details, and I can see very clearly, hey, this actually shows up as warranty. Now, the reason it's showing up as warranty instead of warrant is very clear. I'm using a fuzzy search, and I'm not prioritizing best results. This is true for our tool. This is also true for Google. If I put quotation marks around this, this will give me specific warrant results. So if I click here and look at the preview now, it will show only where warrant applies. We also have a search by contracting party. This is very common. You want to know what agreements you have with Cooper Core. You can see as I start filling it out, it pre-selects the metadata that makes the most sense and starts to find that for me. So I say, here's Cooper Core. This is brought up automatically. I can see that it will highlight the metadata where that was found, give you that information, and again, get that contract preview. Just as before, I can see the information. I didn't look in the contract document. I just looked in the contracting party, but it also tells me, hey, here's a contract. Here's the hierarchy of that contract, the related agreements, any amendments that are there. If a user has access, they can click and be brought right to that contract. Inside, they may have different permissions as whether or not they can change or edit metadata fields once they have those permissions, but they have that view. For this particular, I've given the ability to view but not edit, and I can see, hey, is this contract confidential? Searchable. So you can be very particular about whether or not someone's able to find a contract, what metadata they're able to see, and I can change what folder it is in, determine whether or not they can have specific permissions for that. So like I said before in the beginning, it's very important to be able to create a contract, but you spend a lot of your time finding and evaluating contracts and getting that information. Now that's the goal here is to make it easy to find a contract. You know exactly what you're looking for. You know what the contract is. But what about in the situation where you want to find out how you handle something? So I'm going to look at the advanced search. So I know in the past I've had a lot of large customer agreements. I want to know what terms I've had, what I've done with those customer agreements. So I'm going to bring up those customer agreements. And I'm going to say, I only will look at those customer agreements that are greater than $200,000. So I can use this advanced search to look for contracts based on any metadata value. And this could be things about that metadata value. So this is a value I can be greater than or less than or equal to. If it's a term, I can do starts with, includes, and have all that information. This can include multiple things. So I want all the contracts greater than 200,000 that were created or have the contract manager of Arthur. I could do that, or just all the contracts he signed. It could be that these have whether or not they have specific terms or clauses if you store that as metadata value. So, hey, does this have the standard warranty period? Is there in these contracts a termination for convenience? As long as it's stored as a metadata, you can look for it in these contracts. Here, I'm going to search. I get all the contracts greater than 200,000, and I can see them just in the format as before. It'll tell me very clearly, hey, is this linked with a current master agreement, and provide all the same information, but instead of looking for specific text, we're looking for something about the contract. So whether you're doing a research into a specific contract, how it was handled, who handled it, the text of it, or you want to figure out, hey, what is going on with these contracts? Where have I done large contracts? What terms have I used in them? All of that's available for you to go through.
So Braden, before you move on to reporting, how would this work with non-English content? If I had a contract written in French or Spanish, would I be able to do a search for those characters?
Yes, you can search for those characters as long as you have a Unicode for them. So essentially all languages. This works with whatever you have set up. And you can even, if desired, set that as one of the filters. I don't. All my contracts I put in here are English for the most part, so I don't put it as a filter, but that's a filter that could be used.
A question just came in, if you don't mind me sort of interrupting your flow. It says, one of the examples you showed was a PDF, but yet there was text selected. So how do we search image files? And I think I might have answered that question in my intro, but you want to just maybe chat about storing an image and the text file at the same place?
Yeah, so when a contract is brought into the system, we do an OCR and a natural language processor on top of that to create a searchable version of it. So oftentimes a PDF is searchable text. That's fine. Those are best case scenario. But if you're bringing something older or something written by hand, it's not going to be. And it has to be scanned as an image. Our OCR and natural language processor are going to pull that text out and create a text version that is searchable and stored alongside of it. So you'll have a picture image of the original and a text searchable image to make that process for finding and evaluating much easier.
Oh, fantastic. I have another question here. Is there a limit to the contracts? I can answer that. Is there a limit to the contracts in the repository, either by number of contracts or types? No. We host on the cloud, Amazon Web Services, and for those of you who remember Jay Leno and the Doritos commercial, go ahead, we'll make more. So there's really no upper limit in that respect. Fantastic. Do you want to take us into reporting then?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Great.
Reporting, let me talk a little let me talk a little bit about reporting. Should be able to see my screen now. So here we see a number of prepackaged reports. So this could be something, say, how long did it take to create a contract? Or one of my favorite reports is actually the clause usage statistics. This tells me by clause how often a clause is being used, how often it's being modified, when we're using alternates or fallbacks. And you can actually even bring that up by contract. Now, a lot of these prepackaged reports are about the process of pulling together a contract. How long did it take? What's in that contract? But we actually have a reporting engine in the backend that allows you to create reports based on any metadata element. And if I start to bring up this contracting platform, I can see that, let me actually do a tabular report first and show this can be absolutely any metadata element. You see all of the selections here. Anything you want can be placed as a contract ad hoc report, or those ad hoc reports can be turned into regular reports. And this system can actually be used to create even graphics and work with that interface. So if I click on matrix report, next, just give a little example. I'm going to choose some random columns. But if I go, when I create these reports, I can create different charts so that while these reports come out, that information is put in a visual way for people to use. Simplest possible report, though, expiry report. Just a report. These are all the contracts I pulled together. This is when they're going to expire. Now, I see this. I want to run this as a report every single day, month, week, year. I can set that up. Any of these reports can be set up as a regular report. I can export these as CSVs or Excels, and I can add filters on them so they make the most sense. So I only care about contracts that were signed in the last 3 years. I can make that part of the report as well.
A question just came in whether we're using someone else's reporting tool or whether this is homegrown.
This is our internal engine. So this is an internal engine that we developed to use for reporting. This can be used to export as a CSV or an Excel, and it's very common to do that to drop into another BI tool. So I like our reporting engine. I think it gives very clear, quick results.
Yeah.
The metadata pulled together. But oftentimes your organization has a very good, very complex BI tool, and a lot of them are out there, and you just need a CSV you need to send into that. So every week you generate this CSV, you put it in the tool, and you've got that report to send off to leadership and get the results they need in the format they need.
Super. That answers another question that just popped up, which is, I know Tableau is one of the more popular platforms, so the question came up was, can you export data to Tableau if that's your sort of corporate BI platform? So yes, absolutely. Excellent. Just keeping an eye on the time. Shall we move on to maybe talk a little bit about e-signature, shall we?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
So let me just share my presentation again. So if we take a look at e-signatures in the CLM, maybe we'll just chat a little bit about e-signature support, workflows, integrations, and then again, we'll bring it back to Braden. So when it comes to e-signatures and the contract lifecycle, I mean, the two in many ways are almost tightly intertwined. Many of our customers, started off with a CLM and then immediately, implemented an e-sig platform. And to that end, we currently support Docusign, we support EchoSign, or what is now the Adobe Sign product, and we're even looking at HelloSign for some of our European customers. The ability to support these kinds of e-signature solutions really is about streamlining the entire process, which is both a time saver, but also provides a level of audit capability from everything from the initial request through the final signature and then even automatically uploading. The workflows that we support, especially for those of you who've seen our earlier sessions, we maintain a separate workflow just for the e-signing process. And that is a tightly integrated workflow with the CLM and the e-sig provider. And the rationale for that is quite simply, there are different people involved in the signing process than there were in the intake process or the review and approval process. You've almost always have outside parties, and you may also have people who are only going to be given a contract summary and not the actual contract to sort of approve or review prior to placing their John Hancock at the bottom of the page, or in 4 or 5 different places, depending on the agreement itself. With that, I'd like to turn it back to Braden. Braden, you want to take us through our implementation of e-signature?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So let me talk through a few scenarios before I go right into the e-signature. So we do have some checks into our process. So contract comes back, you've seen as in the authoring at some point, you click proceed to signing. First thing I want to show is as a stop. We want to make sure that before you go on to signing, before you get into the e-signature process, that everything is copacetic. And we have here the ability to compare metadata. So this is actually a contract that came back from the third party and the metadata had changed. When that happens, you can click compare metadata, sign off, and get that information before you ever go into the process. So I'm actually going to go and approve this metadata real quick. And the process is straightforward. Let me make my screen a little more readable for people other than me. Simply go through and approve, and then third, simply click save at the bottom here. And metadata is approved. We're good. We're able to go into the e-signature tool. So once that's done, once you've got everything ready, you have some options. Here it says, hey, do I want to configure signatures? And I'm going to do that. Now, many times you've probably used some e-signature system. You're used to a lot of these options. What do I want in the signature block? Here I can choose and add or take out what I want in there. You can have these be mandatory. So actually our system is set so the back end that some of these are mandatory. I'm going to require the signature and the company name for them. And I'm going to require the email to be included as a pre-filled value. So all of that's there. You have some flexibility when setting this up, but you can determine what has to be in the signature block. I can determine the order of signatures. Does this go to Duncan first, or does it go to Vince first? Or do I want them at the same time? It's up to you to determine the order in which you want these signatures to go out. And finally, you can actually see this as a flow chart if you desire. Finally, the placement of the signature block. So in this case, I could put it just at the end of the contract document. Yes, that would just, both those signature blocks would go at the end. But you have a lot more flexibility. When you create templates, you can determine where signature blocks come in. However, oftentimes throughout, you've added some interesting tidbits. You want to put some initialing sections. You can actually put them in at this point just by hitting proceed and determine where you want to go into the document. So if I go down to the bottom and I say, okay, I want all of Duncan McLeod's signature blocks here. I want all of Vince VP's signature blocks here. But I also want Duncan to have to initial right here. We've made some changes. We want to make sure Duncan signs off on those specific changes. I'm going to save and continue. And I could be done at this point. Now, there is also the option to add more signers. So this document required one signature, but I could have added more. I could have said, you know what we need is more people to be involved in this process, internally or externally. It's not unusual that externally you have to have 2 people involved. But what we also offer is support for a stamp function. So it may be that you only need Vince, the VP, to sign this, but at the same time, you want someone from legal to stamp that they've approved it. You can set that in there, put this person's stamp in there. So Ultria, Ruth.reviewer. Require Ruth to sign off that she's approved this document via a stamp. All of these options are there. They work as well with the existing functions of an e-signature provider. So I'm actually going to send this for signing, and it's going to go through Docusign. I'm going to choose that this goes to Duncan first, and hit proceed. Now, those of you who are familiar with Docusign, all of this is going to be very familiar. And the reason I'm using Docusign now is specifically because Docusign has made their demo platform very easy to access, but this could be Adobe Sign. The same functionality exists where the email is going to come and it's going to tell you right away, hey, this is a document ready for signature. You've probably seen this email hundreds of times. Even if you're not using Docusign, you've probably got it hundreds of times. Simply click Review Document, and you're taken to the Docusign interface. This allows you to integrate with that tool readily so that I can continue and use the features I have there. Okay, I need my signature, my initial here as Duncan McLeod. I'm going to put my initials. Next, sign it, and hit finish. All of this is done without the user ever having to download a document, ever having to log into a different website. They just need to use their standard Docusign procedure. Once this goes out, you'll see in my inbox, suddenly another email goes out for Vince to sign. Because we've set the order up, you can go to Vince. He's going to do the same thing. This is going to go through, hit start. He doesn't have to place his initials there. We didn't require that. So I'm going to put Vince's signature here as well. So Vince VP is signed. No thanks. And we can go back. Now, if I go to signers now, hit refresh. Pending signature, 1 second. If I go to signers now, I can see they both signed. I don't have to upload a document. It's already in the system. The system has saved that version from Docusign, all of their signatures, and I just need to add repository. When that goes in, I have a check. Hey, is this confidential? Is this searchable? What folder am I putting this in? Do I want any comments? Do I want to inform users about this? And there's one last check of metadata. Hey, is this metadata still good? So that when you've done this process and integrate with your e-signature platform, it's easy. There's not a need for you to learn any new tools. There's not a need for you to go in and configure things inside Docusign each time you send out a contract. You just need to work within the tools you already know in a way that makes sense to you.
Fantastic. Now, Braden, this brings up, I think I had a couple of questions that came in. I think we've answered a few of them. So one was, do you support Docusign? Yes. Adobe Signature? Yes. Can I change the order of who signs first? You showed an example of switching between, the Duncan and Vince, that you could easily sort of reset those orders. Likewise, adding users. And then this one might be, I think you answered it already, but I'll just make sure we ask again. Do we support the use of legal stamps, and are legal stamps a replacement for signature or something that is typically added to the signature?
So we do support legal stamps. I showed that. They are typically added to a signature. And there are a lot of different ways in which that process goes about. The way I showed it, if I'd add the stamp there, it would have gone out at the same time as signing, but you could set the priority so that person got it first. We also have inside our system, and I'm going to just show an example, the ability to set pre-signature approval so that you can have that audit trail. So I clicked here and I said I went for signing, but it actually said I need sign-off approval for this particular version. And
you're not sharing that part of your screen.
Oh, my apologies.
I'm looking at adding contract to repository.
Oh, my apologies. I had to
No, there we go. That's why we're doing this one.
Yep. So when you send something to this one, I try to get signers, nothing's there. I do need sign-off approval. So email is going asking these users to approve it. And this process will give you an email, gives them an email giving some information on the document. They could click and sign and approve inside the document to give that approval. Organizations tend to use one or two of these before going to a signer for complicated or important contracts. Either legal stamp, getting it before the signer, or a sign-off approval inside the tool. And we support both of those. It's about which would make sense for you as an organization. And as you can see here, this actually went to 2 reviewers at once. So the sign-off approval can be a parallel review. You can have multiple users getting it at the same time. Hope that answers the question. But
I think it certainly does. I guess one other question. I'm not sure whether we have the time or the forum, but what if they're not? What if they are using electronic signatures, but the other party does not? How does that work, or does it work?
Okay, so there's a couple of different situations there. Let me that's up for signing.
Okay.
Think of the situation where you want to use electronic signature, but the other party does not. You can always add them as the email when you're creating it. They don't need a Docusign account to actually be added here. Docusign charges the person who creates the envelope, they're called. They don't need a Docusign account. Again, same process. Docusign is allowing you to add a signer to the process. However, let's think of the other situation. You really want to use e-signature. It's your favorite. It's your best. You really understand the advantages of it, but the outside party absolutely refuses to. You have the ability to click offline signature here. This will generate a PDF for you to send out to collect as wet signature and upload it back into the system. So you can do it that way. It is, there are places in which e-signature is just not allowed. So any document you can fall back into offline signature.
Fantastic. I think that answers the questions that we have on e-signature. We did have a question come up after we finished the reporting and searching piece on the repository, asking whether all the metadata fields that were shown on the screen were populated automatically. I can answer that. Population of metadata fields by leveraging, let's say, AI to read and interpret and extract will only get you the metadata associated with, or will only get you metadata that has been embedded within a contract. There's oftentimes metadata that still needs to be entered administratively. For instance, who is the owner of the contract or the contract process, or perhaps what business unit is going to be responsible for a budget line item. So we do support that sort of mix of both. And when we saw Braden load a contract into the repository earlier, after having it electronically signed, that's where we often see that additional sort of screening or additional metadata entry occur. One of the more common ones, and Braden does a great job of explaining it, is the actual effective date. You may have an effective date in the preamble of the agreement, but that effective date may say this agreement will be effective as of last day signing. It's easy for us to know when the last electronic signature was applied and make that as your effective date, but there may be times when there are alternate dates that need to be selected by an administrative user. So that's just a very simple example. And Braden, I'd like to thank you for doing yeoman's work on both the repository demo as well as taking people through our e-signature. Now, you've used Docusign a few times here as an example, but almost all the screens that I've seen are Ultria screens. Is the process the same if we were using Adobe Sign?
Exactly the same for the user. A little bit of difference during the integration, but for an end user, it's exactly the same.
Perfect. I guess one question that just came in too is it possible to have 2 e-signature platforms or providers integrated? They said platforms, I assume they mean providers. So it is possible, maybe along either geography or business unit lines, to integrate with both, let's say, a Docusign and an EchoSign, depending on what company or business unit is using our software. So, Braden, thank you very much for taking us through. If I can get the console back from the marketing team. Thank you. So I think we've answered most of the questions as we've gone. We have literally 1 more minute to go before we sort of run through the allotted time. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Certainly want to thank Braden for his demonstration of both repository searching, reporting, and overall repository structure, and of course, the demonstration of not just e-signature, but the workflow that comes before and after it. It is certainly an integrated part of getting agreements, across that the final goal, right? For everyone who's joined us today, thank you very much for spending some time on a Friday, whether it was a Friday morning, Friday evening, or Friday afternoon for you, for those your friends of ours who are from South America. Thanks very much for taking the time. Please stay tuned. We will be putting out another series. This one will be very focused on hard currency savings that are available by managing your contracts in a CLM. Of course, we'll be using the Ultria CLM for those examples, as well as a session on business case justification in challenging times. I'm trying to help those of you who still may be in the early stages of evaluating tools, or even those who are just looking to see whether the time is right to put a project forward, but also those who may already have a competitive solution and are looking to go back to the till, so to speak, and looking at implementing something that can help drive more savings, more expediency, and more cost reduction across your teams, as well as hard dollar outlay, and maybe help you make better arguments, I guess, in front of your finance or controller or management team. So again, this is Arthur Aguette, and for Braden Robinson and I, thanks everyone for attending our Frankly Friday session today. Thank you.